What's up, y'all? Did you miss me? I missed you too. And we have a lot of catching up to do. In this episode, I'll do just that. Bring you up to speed on all things Devyn since the last time we connected. But then we are going to jump right in to an important 4-part series on social isolation and how connection can improve your health. You're listening to The Purple Stethoscope. I am your host, Devyn Nixon, family nurse practitioner. None of the information in this podcast is sufficient nor intended to diagnose your personal medical issue, but there's a lot to learn, so let's start the show. Okay, so I've been away for a little while and a lot has gone down. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about everything, but I do owe it to you all to know why I basically fell off the face of the planet. You know about the breast cancer diagnosis and completing surgery and chemo and radiation. Then went a journey on endocrine therapy, which is a type of treatment to prevent cancer from recurring. That was insanely difficult for me, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And to be honest, every time I thought about recording, I just couldn't muster up the energy, the mental clarity, and all of the things. I guess that's why cancer is a chronic disease. Anyway, also during that period, I completed a Doctor of Nursing practice and a Master of Public Health from Johns Hopkins School of Nursing and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Now, that was probably the thing that really kept my mind busy and kept me pushing through the last few years, to be honest. I had an incredible cohort of nurse practitioners who were also getting their DNP and MPH, and just really gave myself over to my studies for a bit. I graduated in May, and in June, I went to Costa Rica for a wonderful retreat. It was absolutely the reset that I needed, and that just allowed me to get grounded, get centered, think about the things that I wanted to keep in my life, think about the things I wanted to let go of, and think about the things that I wanted to return to, the podcast being one of those. Finally, last month, I attended the National Medical Association's conference in Puerto Rico. Another phenomenal time. Loved learning about the culture and the history, something I like to do when I travel anywhere. And now I am back home. I'm home. I'm doing all the things I love, gardening, getting plenty of squash and tomatoes and beets, and hanging with my dogs and my man, and spending as much time with my grown children as I can when I can catch up to them. Things are definitely settling down. I have a lot of things coming up professionally, and I'll take a quick break to tell you about one of those right now, and then we will jump into our episode. Where my 14th Amendment people at? I am so excited to be attending my first ever PolicyLink Summit. It's going down just outside of DC at the Gaylord National Resort and Convention Center, August 24 through August 28. The theme this year is We Are the Founders, writing the unfinished story of our democracy. If you see me, say hey. Welcome back. Let's jump into the episode as promised. I have a question for you. How many of your neighbors could you name right now? Not wave at, not recognize, name. If you came up with fewer than 3, you are in the majority. Only about 3 in 10 Americans say they know all or most of their neighbors. And I want to tell you why a nurse practitioner like myself is opening a podcast with that question. So, back in 2023, the Surgeon General made us aware of a social epidemic, a social pandemic, an isolation crisis. And this is important because we are surrounded and alone. And I almost named this podcast episode Surrounded and Alone, but I remembered I had another episode years back with the same title. So let's just talk about this distinction that changes everything, right? Social isolation, objectively, it's somebody with few relationships, few roles, infrequent contact with other people, right? You can count these things. You can count your number of relationships. You can count the number of hats you wear. You can count the times that you have contact with other people. Loneliness is a bit more subjective. Loneliness is the distress of this gap between the connection you have and the connection that you need. So they're related, but they're not the same. You can be isolated and not be lonely, and you can be lonely and not be isolated. So, I can't tell which one a person has by looking at them. And this is why we have to ask ourselves, right? Nobody knows by looking at you if you are lonely and isolated, or just isolated or lonely. But this is something that we should be paying attention to as it relates to our own health and wellness. Because other people can't look at us and tell, we have to be pretty in tune with what's going on with ourselves internally so that we can do the things that we need to do to promote our health holistically. So let's talk about the mortality data. And when I say mortality, I'm talking about, the risk of death and dying, right? So loneliness raises the risk of early or premature death by 26% and isolation by 29%. Hold on, Devyn. You said that you could be lonely without being isolated, and you could be isolated without being lonely. That's exactly right. But guess what? Both of them increase your risk of death. Like, we're just going straight to it, right? Death. We're not talking about depression, anxiety, blah, 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 blah. No, we're talking about your risk of dying, right? It's comparable to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And just for full transparency, a lot of this information is coming from the Surgeon General's report. I will put that link in the bio, and these statistics are on page 8. Loneliness and isolation, right? Loneliness increases the risk of heart disease by 29%. This kind of, as a cardiovascular nurse practitioner, right? That's why I practice is cardiology. That blows my mind on one hand. But on the other hand, I'm like, no, that's exactly what I see. People who are lonely, not doing so well. People who are isolated, not doing so well. Isolation raises the risk of heart disease and stroke 32%. Social connection, on the other hand, increases the odds of survival by 50%, and this is across 148 studies, right? So this isn't like my opinion. I love people, and I love seeing people connect and meet each other and I really am a fan of family and close friendships and relationships, but this isn't about me. This isn't about my opinion. This is about our health. It's about our health, right? And things are getting worse. Like, this is not a snapshot, but it's a slide. 49% of people in 2021 had 3 or fewer close friends. That was up 27% from 1990, right? So that is telling us that as time has gone on, we have had fewer close friends, and that statistic was from 2021. So I don't even know what it looks like 5 years later in 2026, but I do know that I thought COVID would make us all want to be around each other more and be closer to each other, and that's just not what we have seen happen. Also, since 1972, our trust in one another has fallen 45%. And, you can take this for what it's worth, but of that, 30% has been since 2016. In 2018, which is a while back, but, these are the statistics that I have to work with and can stand by. 16% of people felt very attached to their local community. That's less than 1 in 5. And you know who was doing the worst, y'all? The next generation. In-person time with friends fell 70% from 2003 to 2020. This is on page 13 in the report, which is an 84-page report altogether. So I'm going to be breaking down some of these things for you as we talk over the next few weeks, right? So, there's a version of this conversation that can turn into blaming, right? The version that says you're lonely because you didn't try hard enough. You're not a great friend. You don't know how to talk to people. But the advisory actually says the opposite. It says connection isn't something that we do alone. It's not something that's equally accessible, right? So, your schedule, your rent, your transit, your shift, your street, these aren't excuses, right? How your life is set up. They're mechanisms. They're the mechanisms through which we connect or we don't connect. So, what are we talking about? What do we need to do, right? It's all about starting with where we are. I'm going to share a story with you all about when we bought our house. And I'm sharing this story both as something that wowed me and was, felt kind of monumental, but also something that I'm a little bit embarrassed about because we've fallen off. But when we moved into our neighborhood, we had a housewarming party and we invited all of our neighbors. Every single neighbor in the cul-de-sac got an invitation. We opened up our home, and the kids were little. So we have these 3 kids, and it's my husband and me and a little dog. Rest in peace, precious Michelle. You were the best. But here, everyone came, and I'm going to be honest with you. I live in a neighborhood that is white, like most of the Pacific Northwest. And part of my reason for doing this is because I knew people would be curious about this Black family moving in, and I wanted to know who our neighbors were. So they're curious about us, and I'm curious about them too, because I have these young children who are not going to be young forever. 2 of them are boys, and we know how that goes, how boys can be so cute when they're little and easily become a threat in the eyes of fearful strangers. And here we are, our home is full of neighbors, and everyone is talking, right? It didn't feel like we were being interviewed or interrogated or anything because everybody was curious about knowing everybody else. And I realized in that moment These people don't know each other. These people do not know each other. And so we started building community from that very day. And it just made everything easier. The anxiety from everyone kind of came down. My anxiety came down a ton. You don't have to worry about me. You don't have to, be curious or poking around or calling the police or doing anything weird with my family because you've know us. We welcomed you in our home. And just that level alone of connection brings down a lot of different anxieties. Now, I recently published an article back in March of this year where I present my framework that I call Health Immemorial. And I won't go too deep into the article. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's called Ancestral Wisdom, Cross-Cultural Nursing, Ancestral Wisdom and Cross-Cultural, something like that. You'd think I would know the name of my own article. But in it, I'm presenting a framework on, our ideas of health, our pillars of health, right? And this Western care organizes around diet, exercise, individualism, and intellectualism. But Health Immemorial is about nourishment, movement, community, and awe. And so what we're going to get into over the next couple weeks is the idea of community. What is community? Where do you find community? How do you plug into community? And all of these things are imperative to our health and well-being. But let's pause for a second and talk about another exciting thing going on in the healthcare community, the North Sound Race and Health Equity Conference. I can hardly believe it's almost time for the 6th annual North Sound Race and Health Equity Conference. This year, we're talking about advancing health equity through mutual aid with keynote speaker PolicyLink. Together, we will examine how grassroots reciprocal support systems can help address long-standing health inequities in our region. Join us if you are a clinician, a healthcare administrator, student, public health nurse, community health worker, or anyone engaged in caring for your community. For more information, see the link in the show notes. Seems like there's a little bit of a theme here, huh? Mutual aid, neighbors, and community. Yes, yes, and yes. So like I was saying, we didn't know each other as a community, and getting to know each other immediately made things better for me personally as a mama, for our family, and I think it brought our community a lot closer together. We got to know who lives here, what kind of things they're into, what they do, and started building relationships. I want you in the next 2 weeks to challenge yourself to learn 3 names of your neighbors. And if I were your nurse practitioner, I want you to treat this the way you treat a medication that I prescribed you. This is a dose, right? It's not a personality test. You don't have to enjoy it. You just have to do it, right? And of course, you don't have to do what I'm telling you, but I do think that it would be really cool if we all started to kind of understand that our health and our well-being is largely influenced by this thing called connection. So over the next 2 weeks, learn 3 names of your neighbors. And I'm not just going to tell you to do that. I'm going to give you the words, give you some ideas to help with some of the barriers, and we can do an accountability loop. I would love to get voice memos that we can play later in this series. You can send me a voice message directly on Instagram, where I can be found at DNP. So let's go for it. But so, you could introduce yourself by saying something like, I've been here for 2 years and I realized I've never introduced myself, which is ridiculous. I'm Devyn, and when you use that kind of language, you're naming the awkwardness out loud, which is going to dissolve that awkwardness, right? Like instead of just randomly one day being like, "Hi, I'm Devyn. What's your name?" Like it's okay to just say, "I've been here for years and I realized we've never like properly been introduced. It sounds ridiculous. I'm Devyn," and on and on. Now, you could also show up with a reason and then make your exit, right? Like if you have a misdelivered package or you get a piece of your neighbor's mail or an extra half of something you made. I don't know if you grow food and you have some leftover squash like I do and I'm trying to get rid of. Just making up a reason to show up um, and then make your exit. Now I have to put a caveat here because you may have been paying attention over the past couple years and realized that there have been people who were met with violence by knocking up and popping up on a neighbor's doorstep. So use your judgment. If your neighbor's outside and you can easily approach them, that may feel safer than, just showing up on their doorstep. Um, you know, but try to learn 3 names of your neighbors in the next 2 weeks and write them down. Make a phone note, put them in your notes, exchange phone numbers or contact information. And that can be weird if you don't have a reason to. So, don't push too much and be like, "Hey, I'm doing this challenge. I need 3 names in 2 weeks and I need your phone number and contact info." But, if you can naturally progress to having each other's contact information and building this network of local supports. We are going to build on that in weeks to come. It can be really handy if you have a 2 a.m. emergency or you realize that you are headed to the airport and you forgot to close your fence. I don't know. We'll get into more of those things as we move on with the conversation. But, you can name the barriers to meeting your neighbors, transparently. Be honest. I'm an introvert, I work nights. I normally don't see my neighbors coming and going. I work nights, but I'm Devyn and you are, or however you want to go about introducing yourself. Safety is real. I touched on that. If you are worried about a specific neighbor, skip that neighbor. Choose somebody different. Be safe. Be smart. Disability and chronic illness, we got to touch on because they can make it very difficult to connect. So, online connection can be a genuine avenue for disabled and otherwise marginalized people. Here's what I will say to that. You're not going to meet your neighbors on Facebook. You're not probably going to meet your neighbors on Instagram. You're not probably going to meet your neighbors on LinkedIn. But there are apps like Nextdoor where you might be able to introduce yourself and just say, you are living in the area or just curious or whatever. You can peruse there and look at some of your neighbors, see their bios, see what they're talking about, and send them a message. And, just say, hey, in that way, if you're somebody who's dealing with disability or chronic illness. And it's also a great way to post different things that can be helpful for your neighbors to know. Like, I've been thinking a lot about wildfires lately and what my exit plan would be. I would really want to know if I had a neighbor that was disabled or had limited mobility, because I would never want to just take off without, checking on them. If you do not have a porch or a yard, mailboxes, laundry, the elevator, parking, every building has a place where people are briefly stuck together. Make use of that space and of that time and of that opportunity. And speaking of opportunities, I have another one for you. Sit tight. I'll be right back and we will wrap this up. But first, I want to tell you about something really special to me. We're going to Detroit. That's right, DNPs of Color 6th Annual Conference is taking place in Detroit, Michigan, October 15 through 18. The theme this year is Designing Our Collective Future, Igniting Community and Driving Innovation. When it comes to DNPs of Color, we're just not colleagues, we're family. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, you better ask somebody. Well, I guess you better register for the conference and come find out for yourself. If you see me, say hey. For more information, check out the link in the show notes. All right, so I want to wrap up this conversation by talking about why I even want to revisit social connection and make this series that we jump right into after a hiatus. Something that has always bothered me is the idea that your zip code can determine your life expectancy, that your zip code predicts your health. And one of the things that I've been working on over the past couple years was a public health degree. And I wanted to learn about public health because you can only do so much in individual one-on-one encounters with people. But if we can have a healthier public and treat people, population by population, right? Zip code by zip code, I don't know, region, state, whatever, then that goes a lot further than all the hoops that one person has to jump through to be able to sit in front of me in a clinic visit. So I'm really passionate about this idea of aging in place, connecting with the people who are around you, about community partnerships, and really knowing that on your worst day, if you are in need, you can go right next door and perhaps have that need met. I lived in public housing for 7 years. You learn your community, and if somebody's going to the store and you know that your neighbor doesn't have a car, you may say, "Can I pick you up something from the store?" If a kid is playing an after-school sport and another kid is also playing that sport, how much easier is it to coordinate pickups? Maybe I get them Monday and Wednesday, you get them Tuesday, Thursday. Maybe there's a game and a parent is working and can't pick the child up from the game. There's so many ways that we can support each other as neighbors and as communities without being all up in one another's business, gossip, drama, all of this other stuff. It doesn't require all of that, but just learning to be neighborly, to have those close proximity connections and helping one another out. Because we are out of our mind if we think that we're never going to need anybody else. And we're also out of our mind if we don't think we have anything to offer anyone else. It's not always money. It's not always something that takes a lot of time. A lot of times these are little things and little ways that we can connect and help each other out in this difficult journey called life. So this week we are going to learn the names of 3 of our neighbors. And next week we will talk about getting out more in the neighborhood, what kinds of things we can access and utilize in our communities that may be underutilized, and really acknowledging the accessibility of some of the things that we need that we may overlook. Because let's face it, a lot of us are going from home to work with blinders on. A lot of us are running our errands and getting back to the house to start dinner without even thinking about what we are passing on the way. So I will be back with you all next week. And until then, in as much as you are able, eat fresh and dance. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Purple Stethoscope podcast. I am your host, Devyn Nixon, family nurse practitioner. If you liked what you heard, why not subscribe or share this episode with a friend or family member? You can also support the podcast by rating and reviewing. You can find me on Instagram at DNP and right here at the Purple Stethoscope.